أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Praise be to Allah. We seek His help and forgiveness. We seek refuge with Allah from evil of our own souls and from our bad deeds. Whomsoever Allah guides, never be led astray, and whomsoever Allah leads astray, no one can guide. I bear witness that there is no God, no deity, no entity worthy of worship except Allah, the one having no partner. And I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is his slave and messenger. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. You who believe, be mindful of God as this is due, and make sure you devote yourselves to Him to your dying moment. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. People, be mindful of your Lord, who created you from a single soul and from it created his mate, and from the pair of them spread countless men and women far and wide. Be mindful of God, whose name you make requests of one another. Beware of severing the ties of kinship. God is always watching over you. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. Believers, be mindful of God, speak in direct fashion and to good purpose, and He will put your deeds right for you and forgive your sins. Whoever obeys God and His messenger will truly achieve a great triumph. Allah God. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. إن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وأحسن الهدي هدي محمد وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثات بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. So in almost all of our past khutbahs, we've been going over the 8 duties of brotherhood according to Imam al-Ghazali. You know, Ghazali, as we know, is a very major scholar of religion. He systematized a lot of the Islamic sciences, and also was one of the first people to kind of engage in philosophical debate with a lot of other systems of thought. It's something worth mentioning in this respect about Imam Ghazali, kind of the context that he wrote a lot of these books in. The context was similar, has a lot of relevance to ours, because the Muslim world had gone from being a place that was relatively small and had gone through this massive period of explosion. It had gone from being, a few cultures, in kind of a limited time and space, to being a worldwide religion. And so there was constant interaction with other belief systems. There was constant interaction with every kind of philosophical and religious and spiritual argument and advertisement you could possibly find. And so he's got a major for kind of systematizing a lot of things and also phrasing them in ways that would be easy to kind of engage these other cultures in, whether it was in debate or in kind of teaching. The first 7 duties, we covered all of them, and today we're going to do the last one, inshallah. So this will be the conclusion of this whole series, inshallah ta'ala. The first duty was material assistance. We talked about this as the first thing, that you should materially help your brother in Islam. And we talked about that there's 3 levels of that. Right? The first level is that you give to him from out of your surplus. So after everything you have is done and dealt with, if you have a bunch of extra, you don't know what to do with that money, you don't know what to do with that stuff, you just got a bunch of extra you don't even need, and you give to your brother from out of that when he has a need. Remember, Ghazali said this is the lowest form of brotherhood, and it's the same level of brotherhood that you owe at the bare minimum to your slave. So this isn't anything special. It's like Imam Hamza said, this is related, not the same, but I think that the same statement applies. When he was talking about adab, he said good manners and discipline. We say people think that good manners and discipline is having good manners and discipline, having adab when people have good manners with you. So when someone treats you well, you treat them well. If they respect me, I respect them. He said that's not adab. That's just acting right. That's just basic home training. Right? You're not doing that. You're not at least respecting those who respect you. You're not at least doing this measure. This is like that's a serious problem. Whereas good adab, excellent character, excellent manners, right, is in how you properly deal with people when they're imperfect with you, dealing with their flaws, dealing with their faults and their problems, and that's where really good etiquette really shines. This is the same thing in material assistance, right? Doing the bare minimum just establishes that you're not just greedy or someone who Allah will question and torment you for not having helped those who are less well off you, for not having helped your brother who need help. The bare minimum is to kind of give them from the extra. The second level, is kind of middle level, is he says that it's that you should basically treat your brothers equal to yourself. Right? I treat my brother and his family the same way I treat my own in terms of my concern for them. In terms of my trying to look out for them. I always ask myself, how would I feel if that was my daughter? How would I feel if that was my mother? Right? Before I speak to her a certain way, ask myself, how would I feel if some other man was speaking to my mother that way, to their wife, or to a brother? Ask yourself, how would I feel if maybe he's wrong, but how would I feel, and how would I want to be talked to in this situation, right? And the same thing with the material aspect, what kind of help would I appreciate? And that you should not make them ask. When your brother becomes so desperate, he has to come to you asking, this is somebody that you know and have a relationship with, means that we fail. Individually, but also as a community. Because people shouldn't have to go out and beg. People shouldn't have to go out and ask somebody. I shouldn't have to go to somebody when I'm in extreme need and say, brother, can you give me something? Like zakat and helpfulness should be a normal part of our day-to-day giving. At the highest level is that you put your brother before yourself. So a person actually sacrifices themselves and treats others better than themselves. And this is the highest degree. And this is the way that the companions of the Prophet ﷺ lived. The second duty was providing personal aid. That's moral support. We talked about the importance of mental health and emotional support, especially in these days and times of that. The third duty and the fourth duty go together. Holding one's tongue and speaking out. So, 2 sentences or so. You don't say anything negative about anybody. Just keep your mouth shut about other people. Even be cautious of speaking, having people's name in your mouth in general. Right? And then, there are special circumstances where there are exceptions. If someone asks about a woman or a man in marriage, it's an exception. You got to tell the truth. Even if the truth is ugly, especially if it's ugly. Then that person that they're asking, is they going to get married, don't be like, oh, brother so-and-so is great. Well, she's walking into a disaster. Or vice versa. You have to tell the truth. And then it should be limited, but it should still be limited to the need. Or if someone does corruption and oppression and harms people, you may have to warn against them. If they do it in public, you may have to warn publicly. If they do it in private, you may have to warn them privately. And that's when it's okay to have kind of negative. Generally, we hold our tongues. Then it's also mandatory, or it's also important to speak out right about injustice and also to speak out positively. It's not okay to have this thing where, like I know some brothers who, say my father never said I love you, never praised anything I did. I only knew this, I did something right because, my parents or my elders, whoever they were, or even my brothers, my friends, or my wife. The wife only says anything, you do something wrong. And if she just says nothing, then that's how you know that you're doing good. It shouldn't be like this. And then when people die, you see this outpouring of affection, this outpouring of praise, and that person never got to know that that's how you felt while they were alive. So we don't want to do that. We should speak out for our brother and our sister and praise them with what's good, without being excessive. The fifth duty was forgiveness. We talked about this in particular. This is all of the believers. Forgiveness is extremely important. Letting go of slights. And for men, this is particularly important. Men should extra emphasize this because we have other people to protect and take care of. So if we're busy worrying about what people's little petty stuff against us and this person talked to me bad and like or whatever, that's a distraction from our job is to be sticking up for the women and the children and protecting them and consuming ourselves and taking care of them and taking care of the community. We should be more concerned with that and more forgiving when it comes to something that's against our personal self. The sixth duty, prayer. Praying for people before and after they die. Our brotherhood is very negligent without us. We should always actively pray for each other. The seventh duty was loyalty and sincerity. We talked about loyalty before and after death, and how Muslims should put each other first, and so on and so forth. The eighth duty, the last one, is I call informality. And Imam al-Ghazali says that eighth duty is, he says the eighth duty is relief from discomfort and inconvenience. You should not discomfort your brother with things that are awkward for him. Rather, you should ease his heart of its cares and burdens and spare him having to assume any of his burdens. You should not ask him for help with money or influence. You should not discomfort him with having to be polite, meaning like overly formal, to go into your situation and defend his rights. No, the sole object, the sole purpose, the sole object of your love should be God. So the purpose of the relationship with the brother and sister is for God. It's actually not about that brother or sister. The purpose is that both of you are trying to get to Allah. And one of the Sahabas, some of you probably heard me say this hadith before, I'm going to keep saying it. One of the companions said, something about the day of judgment at the end of time. And the Prophet ﷺ said to him, well, what have you put aside for it? Like, what have you prepared for it? And he said, nothing. I haven't anything prepared for it, except that I love Allah and His Messenger. And the Prophet ﷺ said, then you will be with those whom you love. And Imam Ghazali said, whenever you have a relationship of love or whatever else, relationships are like contracts. Whatever the contract was initiated for, the contract is over when that thing ends. If we have a business relationship based on we're going to build this house, build this project together, our relationship around that contract is over when that's over. We may go our separate ways, or we may have a different relationship based on something else. But mainly, once you leave that job, the relationship with that space is over. Same thing with brother. Your relationship with people will end when you die. Except for that, where the contract is not end. So the reason for your being brothers was the next life, and it will continue into the next life. And that's a contract, and that's a bond, which will never go away. And then the Sahaba commented, he said, I was never so happy as I was on hearing those words. So all of the journey to Allah is basically this journey by which we're like climbing this kind of, it sounds a little corny about how to put it, this kind of ladder of love and relationships. It begins when you're a child, it begins with the mother specifically, and the child in the womb, and the child being born, the child experiencing that rahmah, which is only a fraction of the rahmah of Allah. And the child experiences a taste of the rahmah, the mercy, of the compassion of Allah from the mother first. It's not an accident that mothers are put so high. It's not an accident that Rasulullah ﷺ emphasized so much to take care of your mothers and honor them. Because this is the first rung. This is the basis. This is the first, shoulder on which you're standing in your climb to Allah Ta'ala. That's where we first learn this. That's where we first receive rahmah. We first receive mercy like the mercy of Allah Ta'ala. In a fractional, echo of it, so to speak. And so, when we have these other 7 tasks, we have these other 7 duties of brotherhood in place, then this last one is basically make things easy. Take this brotherhood extremely seriously, but once we have these kind of things in place, right, you feel safe with people, there's this trust, there's this giving of mutual aid and moral support, there's this forgiving of faults, you have all these things in place, and the last duty is to not be stringent and strict and harsh about it. It's not to be overly formal. It's not to always be checking somebody and always, keeping count of how many of the duties they've done for you and which one they messed up on. You got a whole account of everything they've done. And it's allowing people to just kick back and be relatively chill about things. When you don't have these other duties in place, that's actually how relationships get destroyed. Having informality and being too familiar with people, a lot of problems start from people just being informal and just being familiar, and then all of a sudden someone's feelings are hurt, and you go from brothers to enemies overnight. We've all seen that. Blood gets shed over, just people being informal, being too familiar. I know, and then somebody's like, nah, you don't know me that well, and then it becomes the whole problem, right? So these other things have to be in place for this to apply. Someone said, he who demands of his brothers what they do not demand wrongs them. He who demands of his brothers what they do not demand wrongs them. He who demands of them the same as they demand wearies them. He who makes no demands is their benefactor. Complete relief means rolling up the carpet of discomfort until the brother feels no more embarrassment from you than from himself. Al-Junayd said, if two become brothers for God's sake, and one of them is uncomfortable or embarrassed with his fellow, there must be a fault in one of them. Ali radiallahu anhu said, the worst of friends is one who discomforts you and obliges you to be polite and have recourse to making apologies. As Budale said, discomfort is the cause of broken relations. A man visits his brother, is made to feel uncomfortable, and subsequently breaks with him. Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq, may Allah be pleased with him, said, the heaviest of my brothers upon me is the one who discomforts me and with whom I must observe formality. The lightest on my heart is he with whom I can speak as I would on my own. And one of the Sufis said, do not be intimate with anyone, unless piety will not increase his respect for you and sin will not diminish. The merit or demerit should be yours, while his regard for you is the same. A man said to Al-Junayd, brothers are scarce in these times. Where am I to find a brother in God? Al-Junayd answered, if you want a brother to provide for you and to bear your burden, such, by my life, are few and far between. You're looking for somebody who's going to be, you're looking for them basically to be your help and you can lean on them and all this stuff. The hard reality is that that's few and far between. So yeah, you will have a hard time finding a brother like that. It's really going to be a needle in a haystack. But inshallah, we do. Right? But he said, yeah, it is going to be hard to find that type of brother. But if you want a brother in God whose burden you will carry and whose pain you will bear, then I have a troop, I have a little army I can introduce you to. But the benefit of this is with Allah. Right? We shouldn't overtax ourselves and give until we harm ourselves. But if we're able to just giving to someone else without expecting anything back, the reward of that will be from Allah. Right? So there's still a lot of benefit in that. The speech of the Arabs, remember the knowledge that the speech of the Arabs points to this concept, since their form of greeting is marhaban, ahlan, wa sahlan. He says that this basically means you have a welcome with us, namely room in the heart and in the place. You have family with us, you enjoy their company without embarrassment from us. You have ease in all of this, that is, without anything you want being hard on us. Marhaban means literally like welcome, ahlan like people, like the people to your house. People, ahlan wa sahlan. Peoples, does anybody have a definition of sahlan? Ease, easiness, relaxation. That's the actual greeting. Welcome, ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome with people in ease. Similar to Mikasa Sukasa. And then I'm going to go over real quick before we end the first half. In the end, he gives a general account, kind of a summary of all the things he's gone over. Some general pointers in terms of good etiquette and good manners. He says this is where we give a general account of the manners of sitting in company with various classes of men and summarizing with the words of the wise. He says, do not bear yourself proudly or keep turning this way and that. He says it's not good manners to stand over assemblies. It's also mentioned you shouldn't ask people after where they're going too much. Don't pry into people's business. Right? This is part of making matters easy on them. Beware of biting your fingers, playing with your beard and ring, picking your teeth, poking your finger up your nose, much spitting and chasing of flies from your face, or much excessive stretching and yawning. Let your sitting be still and your speech ordered and balanced. He also says you should avoid being overly familiar with kings. Avoid being overly familiar with, we can also interpolate that onto emirs, right? And to people, and this also applies to elders. Don't get overly familiar and overly comfortable with anyone who has a rank over you, right? When we have this eighth duty about the informality, this is at a high level, right? But if you don't have that high level of trust, if you don't have all of these duties of brotherhood kind of together already, And again, informality can be problematic, especially with someone who's your senior. Never value your wealth above your honor. Honor is always first, and people can have honor with it without it. And he also says, don't engage in excessive jesting. Jesting and joking around should be the same kind of refueling, building brotherhood, it has a purpose. The purpose is that we can't be uptight all the time. We want to build relations between people. We want to have happiness between people so we can be stronger to continue on the path. But people who just kind of are constantly joking, different brothers, like everything is a joke to them. Like you bring up a serious matter, like it's not really a laughing matter, but they're always finding a way to make it a joke. And sometimes this is appropriate to give a little ease off the situation, make them feel a little more comfortable. We're talking about when it's like this, as if there can't ever be seriousness. As if nothing is taken with this serious enough weight, right? We should be cautious of that, not people who are excessively jesting and excessively joking and stuff like that. The Prophet said, he who sits in a session and babbles a lot should say before he rises in that city, glory to thee, our God, thy praise I testify, and that there is no deity save thee. I ask thy forgiveness, and I repent to thee. So in summary, all of these relationships and all of these things, they can be seen kind of hard or kind of overwhelming to try to achieve in this society, in this time. But they are doable. It's really a matter of just starting from the basics. There are a lot of things in the religion, there are a lot of things that when we find that they're difficult to do, we kind of start trying to add other things to try to fix it. Well, the brotherhood isn't where it should be. So let's kind of add this elaborate plan to make the brotherhood better. Because, my worship or my purification myself is not enough. So let me go to these elaborate group figures and knowledge and go on these big retreats and everything. Those things have their place and they may be good. But before that, we should ask ourselves again about fundamentals. These things will not be rectified without the rectification of fundamental basic things. Brotherhood is not going to come by other than doing the hard, slow, gradual work of working on these things and working on ourselves, and not just pointing them out about others, but working on ourselves. Like Ben Perez said when he was here, Amir Hamza summarized it really well. When somebody asked him how would you summarize the whole talk, he just gave. And Amir Hamza said, I can summarize it for you. It's you, right? It's you, but it's not as you. Even if it's not you, like you're the only person you can control. I'm the only person I can make do anything. I can't make anyone else do anything, right? So if everyone in the community kind of takes this on, then it is doable, and we can and will, inshallah ta'ala, with the permission and the help of Allah, have that brotherhood between us. And once that brotherhood, and once these things are observed, these things are manifest, then anything is possible. I'd say these words of mine and ask for forgiveness. Good. Have to bear with me. I'm a little bit tired. Having a baby. Speaking of babies, so we're gonna do this as best we can. But one of the things that's come to my mind that I wanted to emphasize at the end of this khutbah and at the end of this series, this discussion of this book and these duties in general, is as we get older, right? Really young, so but even as you get to a very, you experience any type of age, right? You go through any rite of passage, have any type of approaching maturity, which I hope I'm beginning to get there, inshallah. And you've got kids and these major life events happen. One thing that easily happens is that we kind of lose our sense of imagination. And there are times when I try to envision, you have to kind of remind yourself as a parent, what is the end goal of what we're doing. Right? When you're younger, it's easier for me, that was, being very young for me was yesterday, right? But, I can already see this big difference as I go through this period of my life that when I was a teenager, in my 20s, it was easy to kind of imagine anything. It was easy to kind of imagine a radically different world. It was easy to kind of imagine a very radically different life for my children and for myself. Or even imagine a radically different life for myself in 10 years. Right? When you're older, like now we have so many responsibilities. We get to some extent, we're so consumed in that becomes harder and becomes something you have to be more intentional about. When you're younger, I feel like I was in a stage previously, you almost have to rein in your dreams and kind of rein in being overly naive or being overly excited or overzealous about things. But something that I think is important, and this isn't just with age, this is with life in general, is we have to still keep that. Because when you look at all of these movies together holistically, not just the details of whether I sit or stand when someone walks in, not just the details of exactly how etiquette is observed and formalities. When you look at it holistically, or when you see it, better than seeing it on a book, when you see real brotherhood, real positive community relationships between people, it's something that you can't describe or explain to somebody through a book, unless they have a very, very active imagination, because most people haven't seen it. Like somebody was asking me about, various, how to talk to people he knew about, there's so many young people who are very skeptical about the idea of kind of male leadership. They've seen so much abuse and stuff like that. And he's like, people, they hear me talk about that type of stuff, and they see that in Islam, and they just turn it off. They're just like, anything where it's like men over women, they've seen so much negativity with that, they're just like, oh, I already heard that game, and I'm just not going anywhere near that. It's very young people, right? And I told them, honestly, with that, if no one's ever seen positive male-female relationships, if they've never seen these positive community and family relationships and structures, there's no point telling them verbally. You gotta show them. You gotta show them. It's the same thing with these principles of brotherhood. None of us have really seen brotherhood manifested like this. None of us have really seen the Sunnah manifested like this, except in some exceptional cases. And if we did, you knew it was different when you seen it with your eyes. It's different from reading it in a book. When you were there, you knew something was radically, drastically different. That this was not like any other masjid. This was not like any other church. This wasn't like any other Friday or Sunday. There was real serious brotherhood and sisterhood, and that gathering of the hearts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says only He can do. That was something radically and transformatively different. And when you tasted it, then you know this is not just like anything else that exists in the society. And this is something important in general. Again, my children have made me think about a lot. The world that we're trying to build, the community that we're trying to build, the brotherhood, the jama'ah, the ummah that we're trying to build, for them, we have to keep in mind, even as we're just trying to do the basic things like just put food in their mouths, just keep them alive, just keep them from running in the street, just keep them from getting sucked into drugs and gangs and fornication and all the other things. Just keeping them out of that is not the objective. That's a short-term objective. We have to keep alive that desire and that imagination to be able to remember that when we actually manifest what's in here, it's not going to be like what you see it on the page. It's going to be something radically different. It's going to be a transformative thing. The way that we've seen individuals transform, the way that we saw, Detroit Red transformed into Malcolm X, into a Hydronik Shabazz, the way that you see, a caterpillar become a butterfly, the way that you see a stone cold murderer who's heartless and doesn't, care about human life in any way, become a tender, caring, and gentle father, right? The way that transformation happens in individuals, and it's like night and day, and you can't comprehend how it would have happened other than the act of God, that's the way that communities will be transformed when we manifest these duties of brotherhood. And these duties of brotherhood, it's not significant that Imam Ghazali put them in a book. The secret is not the book. The secret is the example, and it's the actual practices. It's the living sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we manifest brotherhood outwardly. Then you don't have to go take this book to somebody outside and say, oh, look, this is how it's supposed to be. You should sit in the chair like this. And when somebody comes in, you should like give them this amount of your money or whatever. They have to see it. You can't just tell somebody the man is going to be the provider and the protector, and the woman will obey him in everything except what's haram and so on and so forth, and it's going to be okay. People are going to just go back to what they know, their trauma. You have to show them. We have to show them. And we have to keep in mind that what we're going for is not like an update or a patch. It's not like a minor, we're just going to kind of shift around what we did in the church or shift around what we did in the Jahiliyyah and just like make it a little different. Islamic government would just kind of be like their government, but the president would be, I don't know, like more moral, and we would bomb less people. Still occasionally a couple, but not as many or something. It's not like some quantitative adjustment of like a little less oppression, of a little less. This is a qualitative, drastic transformation. When Allah says that you are on the brink of hellfire, He states, and Allah says that you are enemies, right? Cutting each other's heads off, and He made you brothers. And this is something that only Allah can give us, and Allah will only give us if we adhere to the Sunnah of His Prophet, and if we implement these duties of brotherhood, these basics. You do all the praying and extra Quran and things you want, but these duties of brotherhood have to come with it. And it has to be something that we turn to Allah and ask Him to manifest that between us. So that's just something I wanted to leave everybody with, is an emphasis on don't get it twisted and don't let anyone convince you. We talk about pie in the sky being a deen that doesn't change anything. It's just like, there's also this kind of surface deen. Don't let anyone convince you that this is a deen that is just a minor update, like how your computer or your phone has like periodic updates. It just has to like update slightly. You don't even notice the difference. At the end of the day, it's just going to be like a Muslim version of things. No. This is something that is about transformation. We have to keep the kind of softness in our hearts and the imagination in our minds to be able to envision that this is actually possible. That we are going for a radical transformation of our community and society around us by any means necessary with the permission of Allah. Oh Allah, give us the ability to see truth as truth and falsehood as falsehood, to change injustice by any means necessary, to speak out against it when we can, and hate it in our hearts no matter what. And do not make us from those with the weakest faith. Protect us from the weakest of faith. Protect us and the Muslims and the oppressed peoples in the whole world. Palestine, Syria, Africa, Asia, every continent, and every place in the world. New Africa, Chechnya, Russia, Ukraine, Equally Makan. Make us people who keep silent when it's right and speak out when it's right, who have excellent adab and manners when it is appropriate, and excellent informality and brotherhood where it is appropriate. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Our Lord, give us good in this world and in the hereafter, and protect us from the torment of the fire. Ya Allah, we seek refuge with you from anxiety and grief, from inability and laziness, from stinginess and cowardice, and from being overcome by debt and the oppression of men. Ya Allah, send blessings upon our Sayyid Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, your servant, prophet, and messenger, the unlettered prophet, and upon his family, companions, wives, descendants, and the people of his house. Wa aqimu salah.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.